Hello, my name is Nick Harwin. I make music under the name Uncle Pizza, and for the last few months, I've been doing an intensive study on the album 7G by A.G. Cook. 7G is a 49 track album split into 7 sections of 7 songs. Each section has a certain theme of a given instrument. Um, Obviously, super crazy way to make and release music, but this was really appealing to me for a couple of reasons. I think it's interesting how wide a variety there is amongst the songs. I think it's kind of wild how you can have songs like "Show Me What" that sounds like the like hyperpop thing that A.G. Cook does, and then you have songs like "Waldhammer" that are like black MIDI, and then you have like "Being Harsh," which is just an Alex G song, which is cool. And I think it's crazy that like you have 49 tracks and each one of them are good. Like, how do you? This man has no misses, all hits, crazy. And it's kind of deeper than that too, because there's something in this album to me that felt like it was less sort of a singular artistic, message or like expression. It was less of one statement, more of like a series of etudes or experiments or sort of like ideas about what you can do with sort of this pop adjacent, sort of experimental avant-garde leaning kind of production that A.G. Cook is known for. It's like he's challenging himself to do all these different experiments and showing you the outcome and giving you sort of the blueprints to do that yourself. So that's what appealed to me. Great example of this of what appeals to me about this album is the song Note Velocity. Note Velocity is a song where A.G. Cook is experimenting with changing the velocity of the note as it's being played. And this is like a super basic thing. If you play sort of real instruments, this isn't even something you think about, right? It's just sort of naturally when you want harder, more impact, you're going to play harder, get more impact, it'll be louder. But with computer music, it's sometimes something you don't think about, or if you think about it, you do it to emulate how real players play their instrument. But the cool thing about Note Velocity is he's using the automation of the velocity as an expressive tool and as like an instrument almost in and of itself. And that's so exciting. Like, I've been making music since I was 13. I've never seen anyone do something quite like that. Maybe you have and it's not that crazy, but I've never seen that. So that was sort of the song that got me thinking about this. And there's a lot of songs on 7G that are like that, where it seems like there's one kind of guiding idea and then he makes a song around this experiment, or he makes a song saying like, how do I use guitars in X way? How do I use, drums in X way? How do I build a song around drums? How do I make... So I'm a big nerd, obviously, and that kind of thing is irresistible to me. To see someone put out this many sort of unique ideas and have all of them be really interesting and exciting, I wanted to try to figure out what, how deep does it go? Like, how much is there in this album for me, an aspiring songwriter and producer and lifelong student of music? How much is there for me to learn from this album? So that's sort of what the project is. It's me. I listened through it a whole bunch. I took a bunch of notes, and there's a response track for each section of the album, and it's sort of like me trying to say, okay, well, this section is themed around this instrument. How do I make a song with that instrument that still sounds like an Uncle Pizza song, that still sounds like me, but is also sort of taking from the A.G. Cook tradition, for lack of a better term? Like, how do I take what he's teaching and apply it to my life, my practice? So now I'm going to break down all the different parts of my project. I'm going to go through each of the 7 sections. I'm going to say what the piece that I wrote is. I'm going to say what my thought process was, how I got there, what I'm taking from A.G. Cook, try to explain it a little bit, and just sort of present my ideas. The first section in 7G is drums. A.G. drums is what it's called. And that was the one I started with, and it was maybe the easiest to sort of wrap my mind around. A lot of the songs follow sort of a similar approach or structure almost. It's like these very glitchy drums, super fast percussion, not a ton of like tonality or not, overbearing tonality. The songs are very much about the rhythm and the sort of heavy juxtaposition. A.G. Cook loves to have these sort of dense, glitchy moments juxtaposed with these super pretty, ambient, floaty pad sections. A to Z, the opener, for example, starts off super heavy, intense, like Aphex Twinny almost type of situation, and then goes into a floatier, more easy to listen to comfortable pad section. And it's the juxtaposition between those two sections that holds the listener's interest. It's the knowledge that, like, even when this is super gross and distorted, that there's this other thing, this other like moment world that is interacting with the glitchy distorted one, and that's very exciting and interesting. It's like two forces moving against each other. The idea of tension and release is huge in all kind of music, and I feel like this is a very obvious example of that, where he has sort of the tension of the opening of the track and the percussion and all of that, and the release of this beautiful floaty pad section. And so when I was writing my response piece for this, I was trying to keep the idea of juxtaposition in mind. It's not exactly the driving idea in every one of the songs on this section. Drum solo is a super obvious example where that's like just a drum solo, and the interesting thing about that is sort of the timbre of the drums, the specific rhythms that they play, and how A.G. Cook manipulates those over the course of the track. But it seemed super obvious, as like that's one of the main things for a lot of the other tracks. So Good Time, my piece, it's primarily like a semi-atonal opening section, followed by a more lush and pretty second half, sort of a brief callback at the end. My goal for the opening of my track was I wanted to make the drums almost feel like a melody instrument. I feel like the cool thing about a lot of the songs on A.G. drums is that A.G. Cook's drums on this section really are what are keeping the interest. Like, yes, there are vocals, yes, there are keyboard parts, bass parts, whatever, but the thing that keeps your interest for most of these songs is the way that the rhythm works. So even though I was choosing like a very limited rhythmic phrase for sort of the central like theme of the opening of my track, I guess, I wanted to make sure it was something that kind of got stuck in your head, like duh, duh, duh. The kick drum is like catchy. I thought it was catchy. In the second section, I was trying to let the drums take a more supportive role. Instead of being so much the melody instrument, I wanted to sort of reference the tracks on this section like Silver and Gemstone Break, where the drums are definitely the backbone and definitely like the meat and potatoes. I don't know, the blood and guts. They're what's making up the innards of the song, but they're not like the thing that catches your ear immediately, right? Like the vocals and the bass and stuff in my piece in the second half is much more what you're hearing, but still I would say the drums are giving it energy and giving life to it, which is what A.G. Cook is doing, which is what I was trying to emulate. The one final just little production thing that I really want to highlight, because I thought it was really cool, and I don't always notice people doing stuff like this, and I think like if you come across this video and you make music, there's a thing to think about just 'cause it's a cool technique. The thing I want to talk about is that there are moments where the effect on a given instrument or a given sound or whatever will be just really drastically and abruptly changed, but in like a subtle way. So an example of this is like he'll be playing, sort of a regular drum loop that's been going for a while, and then all of a sudden it'll just have a little bit of like distortion or a little bit of chorus on it for, these 8 bars where it's really necessary, and then it goes away. And I think that's really cool. I think it's cool that there's this sort of little subtle twist that isn't hidden behind all kind of tricks and all kind of stuff. I thought it was neat. Second section of 7G is A.G. guitar. Most of my musical education has been about playing the guitar. So I took guitar lessons as a little kid, played jazz guitar in high school and college. Most of what I know how to do. So that was cool. I was excited to get to play with that and see how he approached this instrument that I feel like I know very well. The songs in A.G. guitar are all about atmosphere and sort of a slow, gradual build. It feels very like almost post-rocky, honestly, in Ethic, except that the songs are very slow. But the fact that all of them sort of look like a y equals mx plus b graph, from algebra class or whatever, I think is very, very post-rocky and very much like how the songs on A.G. guitar are structured. I've heard a number of people on the internet and a couple of people in real life say that they feel like this section sounds like Alex G. I also think this section sounds like Alex G, which is cool. I think it's because of sort of the layering and sort of a little bit lo-fi, but sort of in an intentional and artistic way. The muffled vocals, similar thoughts. I was just keeping him in mind. He's around. The guitar is always in the front, and there's often always more than one. And the vocals are usually hazy and sentimental. These are all very much like vocal guitar songs. Both of those elements are really important. And the way he balances them, I think, is really important. Like not having the vocals take up more space than the guitar, but still being recognizable as like the melody instrument in most cases. One really cool little thing he did that I just thought sounded so pretty, and it's not even like that profound, I just thought it sounded so pretty and felt like I had to ape it, was at the beginning of Being Harsh, he has sort of like really pretty finger picky guitar lick that he does, and it's sort of mono and not super heavily affected. And then after he plays it through, I think it's just once, maybe twice. After he plays it through, it goes to panned super wide and like heavy reverb and chorus, and it's just so pretty. It makes it feel so lush, like you're like inside the guitar part. Yeah, I think that's so pretty. I think people should process their guitars like that all the time. The other track that I thought was really interesting, and want to talk about briefly, is his version of the acoustic version of Superstar from the Porter Robinson Secret Sky Festival. I think it's so cool, and I didn't really do this in my response piece, but I'm like going to do this when I get an opportunity in the future. It's cool because it like sounds like it's really just him with guitar and a voice, and that's how it's presented like in the video. If you go watch the video from the festival, that's how it's presented. But as you go through and as the song builds, there's like vocal processing and I think like a little bit of a synth thing that comes in, and it's like definitely not just A.G. Cook and a guitar. And I think it's cool to like adopt the aesthetic of the stripped down intimate performance, but add these other additions and sort of like these surprises and these tricks. I like that the relationship he's singing about could be sort of like the grounded, dude with a guitar, very regular granola thing. And then the sort of synthy vocoder bit at the end is like how it feels to be with that person. Like it's very real, it's very acoustic instruments that we're dating, but it's like it's electronic instruments shooting you off towards the heavens the way that I feel about you when I'm with you. That's cool. That's knowing about the meaning of the song. For my response to AG Guitar, I felt like I could go one of two directions. I could either go very chuggy or very ethereal with it. It seems like those are the things that A.G. Cook thinks guitars can do. They can be chuggy or they can be ethereal, which I'm about that. And either way, it's very much about the atmosphere. If it's chuggy, it's about like the like dense, distorted kind of thing. And if it's ethereal, it's about the sort of like floating around, lost in the haze of the beautiful string plucking whatever. And initially I was like, I was so juiced on covering So Hot You're Hurting My Feelings by Caroline Polachek. I really like that song a lot, and it seemed like it'd be fun to do like a chuggy guitar, like I'm a punk rock cool guy, but like oriented towards A.G. Cook kind of Beetle Bum cover. His cover of that'd be cool to do that. But I kept doing it and it just wasn't really working. It was like banging my head against a wall and not getting anywhere. So I made an original song, and I'm proud of it. I've written in my notes a quick fun fact about making Another Day is I thought that I would tune my guitar to something funky and like get a weird made up open tuning out of it, and just write like the prettiest riff. And but while I was doing that, I was tuning my guitar to like a modified open D, and the D string broke. So the recording that you will hear if you go listen to this song is 5-string guitar and me like awkwardly fingering around the D string. It's goofy, but it sounded good. Yeah, those are my thoughts about it. Third section of 7G by A.G. Cook is A.G. Supersaw. I didn't know what a supersaw was before I started working on this project. If you're like me, I will tell you. A supersaw is more than one saw wave played together on a synthesizer and slightly detuned. So you got like 3 oscillators on there. You make all 3 of them sine waves. You tune one of them up a little bit. You tune one of them down a little bit. Bam, supersaw. Use it in like trance music, all that kind of stuff. I knew the sound, I just didn't know the name. And A.G. Cook kind of has 2 different approaches to using a supersaw. The first you can hear on like Mad Max or Illuminated Biker Gang. It's sort of the like abrasiveness of it, the like the fact that sometimes if you do it, it almost sounds like you're playing a minor second on like a traditional instrument, but you're only playing one note, and that's the note. It's the griminess, the dirt, the rubbing up against each otherness of the detuned of it. And the second approach is like DJ Every Night or Car Keys, which is how a super saw can be just very euphoric and warm and inviting and like this big kind of moment. Either way, whichever approach he's taking, the structure is pretty similar. It's very much like smooth, subtle transitions and gradual builds to a super intense climax, a lot like the guitar songs, but almost like even more of just like a parabola graph, right? Like the guitar songs sort of still were working within pop rock frameworks. These are much more like almost through composed classical pieces or like experimental electronic pieces where it's not traditional recognizable song structures mostly. There's also not a ton of percussion on these songs. The energy mostly comes from like the rhythm of the supersaw or the like the energy and the feeling you get from having that detunedness, the dissonance all rubbing up against itself. My response piece is called Open Space. When writing it, I wanted to try to use both approaches, sort of like on the song Dust, which I think is the last song on 7G, or on AG Super Saw. It's the last song on that section. And slow, gradual change like that doesn't come naturally to me as a songwriter. I'm very like ADHD in the way that I approach it. I want to like have this thing, and I want to grab them all, and I just want it to happen. And I want it to be big and melodramatic, abrupt. These are the words I use to describe my approach. But the A.G. Cook approach on this section is very slow. It almost reminded me of like Telepath or somebody like that, if that's a useful reference for people. So that was very much a challenge, and it was very much me having to sit down and be like, okay, how can I make this an Uncle Pizza song where things are sort of abrupt and just happen, but also make it an A.G. Cook song on the Super Saw section where things are slow and gradual like that. And I think I found a middle ground between both. It builds slowly and forces you to sit with it, but it also is not, it's not boring. It's not like the same thing over and over again. Not that A.G. Cooks are, but that's the thing that I always feel like my songs sound like when I approach this style. So I said before that there aren't a lot of drums on this section, which is true, and I've noted it. But if I'm serving, I was trying to serve the song that I was writing. So there are actually a lot of drums on the end of my piece. They only appear for a few bars, and it's still the Super Saws doing the heavy lifting. I feel like if he can do it on DJ Every Night for just a minute to emphasize the energy of the Super Saw, I'm allowed to do it. I don't know why I'm being so defensive, but I feel that I must justify my actions, so there you are. Fourth part of 7G is A.G. Piano. It's probably the poppiest that this album gets. I would consider the whole thing to be pop music, and this is the moment where it's like, these are like pop songs. Even the ones that are not like, sort of verse, chorus, sing-songy, like ooh baby type of pop songs are like very oriented towards a pop aesthetic. They have like the bubbliness, the sheen. They're very listenable, for the most part, very accessible. Oracle, for example, that's a song that could totally be like on the radio or in like a very like supremely hip department store. You could hear that just playing places, right? It's pop song. But then Polyfloy Boisterous is appealing to a different kind of sort of twisted pop sensibility where it's so much more about like playing with what makes pop songs, right? Like the chord progressions and the way the drums and piano and everything are written and presented to you. It's very much playing with that. And it's, it's supposed to be loud, silly, but it's still interesting and appealing to that pop sensibility. And the instrumental songs are for sure showing the piano to be like a very powerful lead instrument, but the vocal tunes, on the other hand, are highlighting more of like what piano can do as a comping instrument, which is great. Like in Windows, the piano is basically just playing whole notes the whole time, but the production places it at the center of if not necessarily the mix, then your attention for sure. It definitely like makes you aware of itself, right? The piano in that song is important. So my first thought when beginning to write my response piece was that I had to write like a cute, twinkly little piano part. A lot of these songs really emphasize how cute and how twinkly some little piano notes can sound. And I don't have a I don't have a piano, and I have like a 25 key MIDI keyboard over there, but it's broken. So I was doing all of it on I write my keyboard parts on the like musical computer typing, which is stupid, but whatever. So what I did to get these like twinkly piano comping parts is I used an arpeggiator and just played around with it. So that's where that is. Yeah, so Blush is my response piece, and it's very much like a verse, chorus, ooh baby type of pop song. I'd sort of originally thought that I was going to respond to note velocity just because I think that's like such an interesting technique, and like that song is really the one that grabbed me on my first listen through this album. But you know, it's another thing where I just kept doing it, and I couldn't make it sound as good or better than his version of note velocity, so I figured it was better to save that technique, mention it here, and come back to it when I feel like I have something to say with it. I did do a little bit of velocity manipulation in Blush, but it's more subtle. It's less like the thing that makes the song work and more just like a supporting element of a couple of moments throughout the song. The majority of this song is me trying to write an A.G. Cook type piano pop song. Cute shit. And then the ending, I sort of thought it would fade out, but and this isn't a technique that I got from the album, which is why I'm mentioning it. I originally I was just gonna have it fade out, but my friend and very talented musician Gyatso was like, low hanging fruit is to do something sort of like housey. So that I decided to sort of pivot and have the outro be almost a tribute to Polyfloyd Boisterous in the way that kick drum just like smacks you in the face. So that's that song. The fifth section of 7G is A.G. Nord, which was kind of hard to pin down initially, because a lot of the songs on this are pretty different from one another. Like, more so, all the songs have their own identity, like all throughout the album, but on this section, it really felt like there were less unifying techniques or themes. There's a little bit, but they all approach the Nord in different ways. When I'm talking about Nord, A.G. Cook uses a Nord Rack 2, which is a super versatile instrument that I have not played with and cannot afford. So my response piece for this section is built with the Nord presets in the DAW that I use. They sound pretty good. That's all I have to say about that. And yeah, I'm honestly the least confident about my analysis for this section, just because I've never used a Nord. I don't know sort of the full extent of what it can do. So when I'm talking about the Nord sound, I'm talking about like the sort of like classic keyboard, electric piano Nord sound that I feel like is what I think of when I think of those instruments. They're all super different, right? That's what I'm trying to say. A song like Trip Tech Demon is so glitchy and weird and totally could have been like an AG drum song in another life, but a song like Crimson is basically a lullaby. And in Trip Tech Demon, the Nord sound is about providing sort of contrast and nuance to the glitchy, hectic percussion thing, while Crimson is more about sort of the like twinkly little riffs and chords and pretty shit that a Nord can do. If I was like gun to my head, had to say what the uniting themes and techniques, whatever, like the stuff I'm identifying, if I had to find something on this album, all the songs are really using the Nord to be pretty and spacey at certain points. Not always, not every song, not every instance of the Nord, but at some point on every song, there's some kind of prettiness, some kind of spaciness, kind of some softness. And except for Trip Tech Demon, none of them are really super abrasive or noisy. If anything, they're like reverby. So that's what I'm seeing from this section. That's what I got. And because there's not, a super strong guiding idea like there have been on some of the other sections, I felt like I could kind of branch out and do more of whatever I wanted with this section, as long as I treated the instrument in a way that I felt like A.G. Cook would have treated it, and sort of could identify some things that I was taking, like concrete techniques and moments in songs that I was trying to reference. And I, like many of us do, was listening to a lot of Drain Gang while I was working on this project also. So, I thought it'd be fun to do a cover of Wings in Motion by Blady. I know that's the incorrect pronunciation, but I think it's funnier and a better name, low-key. Anyway, so it's a super pretty chill, like, acoustic song. I thought it'd be fun to make it a just like change the type of pretty. What if it wasn't a pretty acoustic guitar? What if it was a pretty Nord electric piano? So I played the chords and tried to make it dense and pretty, like, along of the songs in the section without becoming overwhelming. I feel like it would be very easy to sort of layer these spacey big keyboard sounds and have it be a little bit too much. I think I found a place where I'm happy with how they sound, where there's like enough atmosphere and enough texture, but it's not so much that it takes away from the piece of music. Something that was more of a direct reference is the vocal chops on there. I just thought they sound really pretty with the Nord on Oohoo, if that's how you pronounce that song. So I put that in there. And something that A.G. Cook does all over the place on 7G is sort of a non sequitur, kind of like goof 'em up, fuck you type of ending, which I'm all about. Specifically, I'm thinking about like the noisy riser on Oohoo. I guess this isn't the ending, but there is a very pretty noisy riser on Oohoo that feels like it's gonna rise and then sort of doesn't. And so I wanted to take that idea and make that kind of my non sequitur ending. I wanted to take and that's what I wanted to take the noisy, weird behavior of the riser and Oohoo and have that be my non sequitur A.G. Cook type ending. And that's my song. It's a cover. It's a Blady cover. Number 6, section 6, A.G. spoken word. Figuring out why these songs worked was comparatively really easy. I know I said drums was maybe the easiest to figure out, but this one gives it a run for its money. That's what I'll say about it. Gives it a run for its money. With the exception of The End Has No End, which is basically just like a loving, faithful Strokes cover. Every song on this section is one or more spoken word phrases that are manipulated and arranged into a much larger whole song, fully fleshed out piece of music, or sometimes just like a vibe, which is fun. Something very cool that A.G. Cook does to make all these songs work is that the spoken word phrases that he's using they wouldn't sound super out of place in like a regular big pop tune. An example, the song No Yeah is like a very intimate, like ASMR almost recording version of Oh Yeah, the song off Apple, also by A.G. Cook. Which is cool, like that this song came out first and then he released that like more regular, approachable version of it. I think that's cool. And it's just A.G. Cook speaking. I think there's like maybe one tone of ornamentation on it and then like a riser at the end to close it out. But what makes it interesting is that the song, the lyrics to the song Oh Yeah are so like syrupy and sweet, like just pop deliciousness almost to the point of parody, right? So when you take those lyrics out of context and play it up as like some creepy dude like breathing down the back of your neck, it's weird, it's interesting, it's exciting, like the tension and release between the comfort of those syrupy, sugary, sweet pop lyrics and how uncomfortable it feels to have someone whispering them in your ear like that is really compelling, in my opinion. And I think it's those kind of like techniques and twists that make the songs on spoken word effective. For my response piece, I decided to rework the opening song from an album I put out called Best of You. Best of You already was sort of like compositionally similar to a song like Green Beauty or 2021, where it's one phrase repeated over and over again while the music builds beneath it. So it felt like sort of a natural thing to go back and redo. And I feel like there's instances on this album of A.G. Cook revisiting his old material, like DJ Every Night or something. And I'm embarrassed to admit that despite making computer music for years, I've never learned to use a vocoder, which is something A.G. Cook makes extensive and brilliant use of on this section. So I taught myself to use a vocoder, and just try to channel some of the prettiness and the effectiveness of the vocoder on his songs to my own. I was trying to reference like Hold On, for example, where it starts less clear and a little more abstract and becomes sort of euphoric and pretty by the end of it. And once I sort of had that in mind, Best of You is already a song I'm very familiar with because I wrote it. So it was just sort of figuring out exactly what happens along the way to emphasize those things. I was trying to emphasize the spoken word, the vocoder. The cool thing that happened... This is future editing, Nick. The part where I tell you about the cool thing that happened was very rambly and confusing. So I'll just tell you the cool thing that happened is I started to internalize some of the techniques that are just present throughout the whole album. And all the parts that are really A.G. Cookie on this song are some of them conscious choices, but I think also some of them just things that I started to figure out, and it was very exciting to me that I had just figured this stuff out sort of intuitively, and that I'd gotten these techniques into my fingers a little bit. The last section of 7G is AG Extreme Vocals, which is probably like the most conventionally AG Cook section of this album. If someone were to ask me, hey Nick, what do you think an AG Cook song sounds like? Can you show me? Can you tell me what AG Cook's music sounds like? I would be like, this last section of 7G, I think it's pretty representative of the kind of things he does well. What is extreme vocals? That was my question when I first saw that name of the section, because it doesn't really sound like anything. And what I think extreme vocals means is exactly what's on here, because the vocals are extreme. They're covered in like all kind of effects. I don't know if there are any dry vocals or even like vocals that want to convince you they're dry on this whole section. It's like very blown out, over the top, and all the vocal performances are just like almost cartoonish in approach. Like the Sia cover on here truly feels like something you'd see in a cartoon. Very, very big, melodramatic type of vocal delivery. And that's part of their appeal is that kind of that sense of drama and just over the topness, and how they never want to stay in one aesthetic or vocal style for too long. I think Crimson and Clover, A.G. Cook cover of Crimson and Clover, is the best example of that from this section. It's like very crunchy guitars in the beginning, and then it pivots to this call and response thing with a guitar and a synth, and it goes back to like a big rock and roll hook, and then there's more like an electronic reprise of the guitar and synth, and then Alaska Reed comes in and she sings over the top of it, just like a heavenly robot voice that closes it out. All over the place. Chandelier, I know I already mentioned, but the way that the chorus comes in, which is this big piano chord and everything else drops out, that's such a it feels like something you see in the theater, right? It's such a big, grand gesture, it's very extreme. And it's just fun, like fun ass songs on here. And there's a lot of collaboration on extreme vocals. Tommy Cash on All Right being mushy and lovey is like the best shit I ever heard. So I aforementioned friend Gyatso, I hit him up to do some vocals because man's got extreme vocals, and it just seemed like a natural fit, and I wanted to get some collaboration in there. You got it. And so we knew we had to kind of make it all over the place and dramatic. So the song sort of started as just a couple of loops, and I expanded them and tried to make them, this big weirdo pop song. And it's maybe the least A.G. Cookie of any of the songs that I've responded to. Like any of my response pieces, this is the one that is the most Uncle Pizza and the least A.G. Cook. And I think that's okay, because on this disc, A.G. Cook is really leaning into what makes him unique as a songwriter and a composer, so it feels natural that I would do the same thing for my response. And extreme vocals is something I feel like I use a lot anyway. I love to put all kind of stupid nonsense on my voice. So it just felt in my wheelhouse. It felt very natural to make this, a very Uncle Pizza kind of song. But I still, I like I was saying before, I think the ethos and sort of approach is still pretty firmly A.G. Cook. I think that by this point in the project, I couldn't have not had it be that way, right? Like I was focusing my energy on this album and what it had to say. So even when I was, doing Uncle Pizza work on the side, I think a lot of A.G. Cook was seeping in, and I think that the hard transitions and the over processing and the climactic choruses that I have on here are still very in line with what I was trying to accomplish. So I'm proud of that overall. In conclusion, I think this was a very helpful exercise. It was good from sort of a very tangible hard skills kind of perspective. I learned how to use a vocoder. I think my pop song chops have gone up. I think that my mixing skills, my willingness to just sit with a slow build, I think that's all definitely improved from working on this. And it's just good. It's good to get out of your own head about it a little bit, right? Like I write songs like Uncle Pizza writes songs. That's all I've ever known how to do. That's all I ever will know how to do. But it's an interesting exercise to sit down and be like, how does A.G. Cook write a song? And what can I, by putting myself in his shoes, by taking, all of this music that he's recorded and figuring out what makes it work and trying to put myself in that position, what can I learn? Like, how can I become better at being Uncle Pizza by pretending to be A.G. Cook for a couple hours? You know what I mean? That's super useful. And if you're a musician who's watching this, if you're one of my music homies, I'm going to show this to you probably, like, definitely do this with an album that you like. It doesn't have to be such a, like, gargantuan project. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to interpret it as in the way that I was interpreting it, but it's definitely good to, like, really sit down and study. Like, it feels like when they were trying to teach you how to write in high school, so they had you read a lot of people's good writing. I think that's what this is. It's good to study the music you love, and I've been listening to A.G. Cook since high school. I've always been in awe of his production and songwriting skills. So I kind of didn't. I feel like I didn't have a choice but to sit down and try and learn some of this stuff, at least a little bit of it. And I'm still in awe of it. It's still this very mystical thing for me to look at some of his songs that I think are really incredible, but it's less mystical. It's been demystified for me a little bit. A ton of stuff I missed on the album or didn't have a chance to reference. And there's totally interesting conversations to have about these songs and these techniques that I didn't even bring up. Like, I was really trying to learn things that I didn't know. And the limitation with that is you don't always know what you don't know. So I hope that other people listen to the album, listen to my responses, and, talk to me about it. Either way, I'm proud of myself for completing this project. Thanks for watching this or listening to this. Yeah. Talk to you later.